Town Talks is a program that we just introduced at BAVC with Isa when she joined. I don't know, it feels like maybe 10 years ago, Isa, but actually it's like been less than a year in COVID times. But really the intentionality that Isa just talked about really is, it makes this event and talks like this one of my favorite things that we get to do at BAVC, which is really bringing together media makers from different stages of your careers, working on different art forms, full of curiosity and hopefulness about, kind of learning from each other into these forums. And so I truly love it. So BAVC, if you haven't met us yet, we are an almost 45-year-old community media organization. We're based in San Francisco. And really, we like to think of ourselves as a community of media makers. So we create programs that are supporting media makers from young people to people of all ages and at all stages in your practices. And the idea is we're trying to help support with tools like learning the craft, learning how to use equipment, storytelling, and also we're really big about social justice and supporting social issue type of projects. So all of those kind of wrap together into BAVC's programming. One of our most exciting programs is called our Media Maker Fellowship. And I'm really pleased to let you know that Rodrigo, one of our guests, or actually our people in the conversation this evening, he is actually one of the leaders of that program. He just joined us as one of our creative directors. Super thrilled about that. And Rodrigo is a person that I've had the opportunity to, yes, Ria, thank you, amazing. Actually, so excited about this. Rodrigo has touched the organization already in many ways. He himself was a fellow in our Media Maker Fellowship, working on a project that he is just at the kind of later stages of wrapping on that he might talk to you about. And he's been a board member, he's been a mentor to many of our up and coming filmmakers. So he's already a really vital part of our organization, and we're so excited that he's joined us on staff. So with that said, I just want to say a couple final thanks. One to Isa, again, for putting this on, to Brittany for putting this on, and also to our amazing partner, Daniel at CiNEOLA, who we're so excited to continue to get to co-present events like this with. So I will pass it to Rodrigo Reyes.
Hello, how's everyone doing? Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Isa. Thank you, Brittany, and all the behind the scenes. Yeah, no, this is a lovely, lovely, lovely group of people. Thank you so much for inviting me for this conversation. And I guess we should just get the ball rolling. And so the idea is that, Miguel and I will just like toss ideas back and forth. And it's a little complicated because in my case, for instance, my film can't be seen widely yet. Hopefully that'll change over the next few months. But we're going to try to keep it focused on things that we can all like discuss and just kind of give enough examples so that we could, the conversation can grow. And so in that sense, I just wanted to share the trailer for 499 with you. I'll put it in the chat. And this film is like a project that's like very close to my heart. And basically, the film is a response to like, how do you make a movie about the 500th anniversary of the conquest of Mexico? It's like an encyclopedic subject, So my response, as you will see in the trailer, was to mix fact and fiction. So I'll send it to you now in the chat, and then maybe we can come back here at 5:16 after you all have seen it.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, if you can click the link in the chat and go watch it on your own and then join us when you're finished.
Right. Thank you. Are we all back? Shall we call it that we're all back? So you know, this film is a docu-fiction hybrid, right? And this conquistador walks from Veracruz all the way into Mexico City, retracing the steps of Cortez. And so all of a sudden, like, there's like all these layers that are provoked by this actor who's playing this character, and he's meeting real people, like actual regular people who have dealt with intense violence. So all the testimonies that you see in the trailer are all real. They're all actual people that, like, we built a collaboration with. And so I guess that's one of the big themes that we want to highlight for today, is just like this idea of like, how do we expand cinema and create like different kind of connections between audiences, and even when making content itself. And I don't know if anybody has any questions about the film, but maybe we should move and pass the ball to Miguel so that we could watch something from La Marea and then really get into it.
We can
I'll
maybe
pass the ball to Danielle.
Yeah, there we go.
Let's pass it to Daniel, who will do an assist to Miguel.
Thanks, Rodrigo. And yeah, firstly, thank you to Paula, to Isa, Brittany, and the rest of the BAVC team for all the work involved in setting everything up. I'm Daniel Diaz. I'm the founder of CiNEOLA. We are a platform for Latin American stories. We celebrate upcoming filmmakers and specifically documentaries that portray the diverse realities and nuance of the region. I'm super happy to be co-presenting this town talk today, especially, you know, in the context of these two artists and this conversation about their unique work and approaches to storytelling. So I will now introduce the second speaker, Miguel Novello, who is an artist, filmmaker, and director of La Marea, which is an interactive documentary that's available to watch now on CiNEOLA.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Rodrigo. Thank you, everybody. My name is Miguel Novello. I'm a filmmaker, visual artist, and I also do certain cultural events and projects. I'm originally from the peninsula of Yucatan, but I've been living in the Bay Area for 5 years. And just like an hour before the talk, I was feeling myself from the Bay Area, and just trying to acknowledge that that's how I feel now. So yeah, I'm a Bay Area filmmaker. I'm so excited to be here in the town talk with BAVC and CiNEOLA. Both organizations are amazing. So I'm very happy to be here. A little bit about La Marea. It's a project I did 2 years ago. It's a documentary, a very experiential film that I really wanted to do in a way that has like multiple storylines or multiple ways of perceiving the film. I would like to approach documentary filmmaking as a form of capturing life, and I think life should be perceived in many different ways. It's not like a one shade or like a one point of view. Specifically because I'm documenting a friend of mine. His name is Jorge. He's from Ceiba Playa. And while I was doing that, I really felt that that was the way to do it, just to get these different point of perspectives. So I'm going to share one version of La Marea, which I would like you to see for around 2 to 3 minutes. It's a 360 video, so you can scroll around just to get the sense of La Marea, and then later you can watch it if you haven't watched it. So, so yeah, I'll count 2 minutes and then I'll resume. Okay, that's 2 minutes on my chronograph. So you can resume watching it later on. And I'm just gonna share really quickly that if you wanna watch more in depth later, this is where the project lives, lamarea.cineol.la. But you can experience more the full depth of the film or the full depth of the project. Oh, and it's like a landscape where you have these portals where you can like transport to different time and space, which is just different scenes and shots of La Marea by exploring Ceiba Playa. If you haven't seen it. So, Rodrigo, are you here?
I am here.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Now we're acting. Nobody's here.
No, we're all here. So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just want to start with a town hall, like just start our conversation.
I wonder, what do you think, just following this theme that Isa set up, like what is La Marea confessing? What is it confessing? You know, this idea, we were talking earlier, we were talking earlier before you guys came on board about how fascinating for me it is that you're making this piece where you kind of like suspend time in a small town like Ceiba Playa out in Campeche, and like you create all these like little jewels of time that live in this interactive space. So what do you think that the project is confessing? You know, not in the sense of guilt, I guess, not sin, right? It's just like, what is it saying?
Well, I don't know if you have this feeling, but as a filmmaker, I'm always I'm always itching for more ways of expressing myself. I think the linear timeline of the film, makes me, I don't know, so itching of like being able to show more of what you can see. And knowing the platforms and the ways that you can reshare like a story in multiple perspectives, I'm just having a little bit more of like how do you transport the viewer into a different space, like a fully? And I feel like we don't see it this way. I think we really explore and look around. And I think that's what I think is confessing, my willingness to never stop editing, perhaps, or my willingness to just be able to share my experience. And I think I don't know, like, I feel like that's what was my itching, my guess, to just really be able to hopefully transport the viewer into this portrayal of life in Ceiba Playa.
Yeah, it feels, you know, like, have you heard of this idea that time is really an illusion, right? And of course, like, there's lots of theories about that. And even like in the Yucatan, the Mayas had like all these ways that time was flowing and existing. And I've been thinking a lot about that, about how time doesn't move the way we think it moves. And film is meant to be like this thing of like, it mimics the arc of what our life is supposed to be, right? Beginning, middle, and end. And it's like, it's so not true. Like, I keep going back to memories that are, you know, deep in my mind. And you know, like, those memories are still actualized over and over, right? And they, you know, they could be anything. It could be anything for anybody, right? There's certain things that obsess us, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's the idea of like the present. We never actually enjoying present at the time that it hits our brain. That's already in the past. And I think filmmaking or video making really plays with this time all the time. We're playing with that. Or like as Tarkovsky said, they're sculpting time. So this idea of like capturing time and then just like, I think trying to figure out how to express time. I think that's what video and filmmaking allows you to do. So in a way, I think I'm just like letting myself be in that space where you're like capturing your memories, where not all the time are linear, are like composed of different moments. And that's what I was trying to express back. Yeah.
I really encourage all you to watch all of La Marea because there's like all these little jewels in there. Like I love, there's a scene in there like where he's at the circus, and it triggered memories for me of being at the circus and seeing that same kind of circus, you know, like a circus that was like not too like sophisticated, very accessible, very fun. Like I love that scene because I have memories of kind of being in that place in a way, you know, like I remember going to where my aunts would live in a smaller town and going to a smaller circus, and it's just so vibrant, you know, like and I love that about the project, that it just feels like a memory.
Could you tell me, well, this is out of script, but I'll just ask you right away. Could you tell me like where $4.99 came from? Like, wait, but I want to know like the first time that you were like, yeah, $4.99.
So for there's very few people on this call who have seen the full film, but you can tell from the trailer, it's not a light-hearted film. It's a dark film. And but originally the movie was supposed to be a comedy. It was supposed to be a comedic documentary where I was going to go with a crew on horseback from Veracruz to Mexico City, and we would film ourselves, and comedy would happen because it would be miserable, like going on horseback for that long. With no experience, I mean, I can ride a horse like when you go and rent it for an hour, but you know, it was going to be brutal, and it was going to be kind of like a commentary on like this idea of building an empire. But then I started thinking about it, and I was like, you know, there's all these things happening in Mexico that I'm super concerned about. You know, I had made a film called Purgatorio that was like a journey around the border, and I was like, man, like, you know, there's all these issues. And then I started researching, and I realized that the issues were living on the actual footsteps of Cortez. You could do like this cross connection with all these crazy issues, you know, like the murder of journalists, like the indigenous rights movement, like even feminicide, which for folks who don't know, it's like a specific type of crime in that's happening a lot in Mexico and Latin America, where women are targeted for violent crimes. And so like I was like, how do I make sense of all this? Because I'm not interested in having an argument about what happened in the past, you know? I want to talk about why is it still happening. So then it clicked, you know, but for me, it's just been a project, I guess, that brings a lot of little threads in my life together. And I think that's something that I see in your work too, is like this connection of personal, like if an artist does something and they don't really want to do it, it's not about something inside them. It feels like it's just doesn't connect sometimes, you know, and that's the stuff we love, is connecting with ourselves. And so I remember, speaking of memories, being a very little kid, like 4.5, probably 4.5, and being at the National Anthropology Museum in Mexico City, which is an amazing museum. And I remember sitting there in front of this mural that Rufino Tamayo painted of a jaguar, you know, duking it out with a feather serpent, you know, and you know, my dad sat me down and explained it to me like I was a grown man. And so I really appreciated those visits, because my dad always treated history really seriously. And I think at the end of the day, that's why I wanted to make this movie, you know, because I have been fascinated by that history. And I think that's good, because without that, I wouldn't have survived the production of the movie.
Right. This makes me think about like how, even if you're doing a documentary, we're using real life characters and people, how our camera, or like not our camera, or selective way of seeing makes our voice speak through the characters, which is, I don't know, like it's just so sort of fascinating, because I can see a lot of you that I just getting to know you more, and I see more of your voice, you as a person in your documentary. And my guess is my film is also full of myself, even if I'm not specifically there, or I mean, there's barely dialogues, and then I feel like I'm still communicating through the visuals and sound.
How did you navigate the relationship with Jorge to portray him, or as, and you know, build this film around him? How did you negotiate that relationship?
Well, as you also, the film started from somewhere else. Like the whole point in the beginning of the film was he wanted to be an actor, and the whole point was to make a film about he trying to get to become an actor. In Ceiba Playa, because those were the things that I think were more interesting to me. Like I was teacher of him twice. He took 2 workshops that I was teaching in Ceiba Playa. That's how we get to know each other. Knowing him, he's always acting really very like to be in camera. And talking to him and knowing him more, he was just like, yeah, I just want to be an actor, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, sweet. Like, maybe we can go, I don't know, to Campeche and start like getting into an acting, into a play, or make a short film, blah, blah, blah. But he really wanted to stay in Ceiba Playa. And now in my head, that didn't compute, because I migrated to, I don't know, like achieve the filmmaking dream or whatever, you know, make films. And he's just doing the opposite, like, but at the same time trying to achieve that dream. So I was like, okay, let's make this film about you trying to be an actor in Ceiba Playa. Let's make this happen. While we're doing this, we changed the whole thing because he didn't want to be an actor while we were like recording. He still wanted to make a film about Ceiba Playa. And the first day we're shooting, I was like, okay, let's go to the beach. Could we go into the ocean? Blah, blah, blah. And he says, I hate the water. I hate the ocean. And that for me was mind blowing. I was like, what? You want to be in Ceiba Playa? You want to be an actor? Like, but you want to like, still live here? And I don't know. I mean, I saw myself in him, because what he was telling me is exactly the same things I wanted to do. But he was 100% committed to that dream. That's where the Mexican dream came about. I completely forgot your question right now. My relationship with Jorge.
You're addressing that. Yeah. Go, keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think at the end it was like a very internal conversation between each other about like how we wanted to portray Ceiba Playa. I think he's very interested in that aspect of Ceiba Playa. I think he really loves Ceiba Playa, and so do I. So I think in a way that was like the deal that we had. Like I was going to make a film about Ceiba Playa, and he was going to make make that happen. Last time I saw him this summer, and we interviewed the historian of Ceiba Playa. I don't know if that's just a thing all around Mexico, but every town in South Mexico, I guess this is a thing. There's someone who is in charge of the stories of the town. So now he wants to make a documentary about him. So I'm going to help him do that. Yeah, that's my relationship with him. He's just a friend who also wants to make films. And he embodied that protagonist aspect in order to tell a story about Ceiba Playa.
And I think it worked really well that he was kind of like resistant to the role, because then when the camera moves away from him, you feel like you're seeing through his eyes. And it works really well in the project, because it's like in the piece you're like living his memory, and then he's in there, and sometimes he's very in there, and sometimes he's like in the back, you know, or you hear him laugh or he says something funny, and like, you know, you feel like very subjectivized, like you're right in his world, you know. And yeah, no, I really love that. And I love the transparency of the process to build a collaboration, rather than to say, well, I'm making a film about you, I'm like Mr. Film Expert, you know.
Yeah, no, and also part of the deal is that he had to make the music of the film, because he likes to play the guitar. And I was like, yeah, let's make this happen. Yeah, I want to know how was your construction of, how do you end up with Hernan Cortez? I think that's a great question, and that's also not part of your script, but I just want to know that.
So he's not Hernan Cortez. He's actually a helper of Cortez. He's his helper. And but I made that decision because I was like, no, this is not Cortez. Like Spielberg can go do that. And in fact, Spielberg was going to do that. he was going to make a mini series about Cortez, and that got canceled because of COVID. Thankfully for $4.99, right? Now everyone's going to have to watch my movie. But I knew from the beginning that I didn't care about Cortez. I didn't care about Cortez because Cortez, he left a legacy. He left letters. He was sued by the Spanish crown. All these things happened, you know, like in his life that we know about really well. You know, I even learned through, you know, talking to professors and stuff, I learned about his love life because, you know, he had this indigenous interpreter, Malintzin, who was a young girl that he then later, you know, she married one of his captains, and I talked to somebody who argued that that Cortez like did that for her as a favor, you know, because he could never marry her because of her lower status, but he married her. So like you knew so much about him. You knew even like, you know, like that kind of stuff. But I was like, what about all the guys that we don't know about? All the guys that came over here with this dream, you know, this very exotic, you know, quest of wealth. And they were like really miserable in Spain. You know, they were very poor, even though they were nobles, and they come out here. So this is that guy, you know. But just kind of to connect it to your relationship to Jorge, when I worked with the folks to convince them and invite them to be a part of the movie, the real people. So in the movie, the people have to listen to this conquistador. They have to listen to him. No, he has to listen to them, sorry. And then we hear his voiceover, but he never gets to speak to them. And, you know, like it became very transgressive. I realized, you know, as the movie went along, for people to have someone that represented that authority to listen to them. And if we think about it, like, and I'm not saying I realized this at the time, I was like, luckily, I hit on something that was already there. So it's like this idea of like discovering something that's kind of already happening. Like, you know, you look at the protests across all the countries in the world, you know, for justice this year, from Mexico to Chile to here in the US, it's always about listening. It's like, listen to what we're saying. That's like the first act of transgressing power, you know, it's like listening. And so that relationship helped a lot because I had to explain all of this to people. And when they agreed, they would come on board the movie, and then they would have suggestions, and the actor would listen to their testimony as well. And so it built a really good synergy, so the film doesn't feel stiff. It feels like we're really collaborating. And that's the biggest lesson that I learned off of this project, is just be completely transparent with people and just collaborate, because the stories are there. You know, I'm not in control as much as I imagine I am.
I'm going to jump to this idea of like using the mechanism of fiction and like the break of fiction and reality. I think it's very clear in your film, which sometimes and most of the times when you have this type of projects, it's more subtle, or they're trying to hide it. You never know like what you're watching, and that's like the play of like, am I watching something real? Am I not watching something real? But in yours is like a very like, of course, in the nose, because you have a character from the past in the present. You never like, but as we talked before, when I was watching your film, I really embodied the character of your film, and I was doing the exercise of that could be, I mean, in some way, it could be expanded cinema. In some way, I'm interacting with your film because I'm experiencing like very clearly from the perspective of your character. Like I'm trying to think about the past and the present all the time through the eyes of this character. Can you tell me a little bit of that process? Or like, when did you decide to like, okay, I'm going to jump back to my fictional character and then going back to reality? How does that happen?
There we go. Trying to unmute. You know, for me, that process, my goal was to not have that line, to have them exist in the same space, as if you were seeing a real ghost. So in a sense, the movie is a documentary of a real ghost, a cultural ghost. He lives in the culture, and we just made him alive on camera, but he's already there. So that was my approach to that. But yeah, like usually with hybrid films, you know, you jump between fiction and documentary, and people don't, they want that jump to be easy. Yeah, because we've been trained in our minds to make it, you know, for films to be entertaining and to really flow.
Right, to be in disbelief, like we believe everything we see. Right.
And so that's why the only films you see of people coming from another time to our time are comedies. You see, like I looked and looked and looked, and I even found like a film from Yugoslavia by a filmmaker from the 90s, and that one was a comedy too, you know. And so it's just it's hard to do that, but I think when you enter the space and you accept that the film is what it is and it's not going to give you these answers, it becomes very powerful, because every conversation has, like, you know, the facts that people are telling you, and then, you know, the second reading because of the conquistador, you know. So I wanted to ask you, then in your project, do you feel that there's like a sense of like, what is Jorge going to do with his life? Like that question for me seems to be like right there. It's like, you know, and one of our ideas was belonging, right? And it seems like he's so happy in Ceiba Playa, but is there like a, you know, to me, like as the more moments I watch with him, I see like this question mark of like, what is going to happen to him, you know? Because I grew up, you know, between Mexico and the US, and in a small town in the US side. And it's like, when you're in a small town, it's always like, what am I going to do with my life, you know? So I felt very identified with him. And I really wanted to, you know, at least get a feeling of what's going on, you know, like what's on the horizon for Jorge, you know?
Well, Ceiba Playa just become like a major district, or I don't know what would be the exact translation, in Campeche, which politically and geographically is something major in the history of where I'm from. So there's a lot of interest, like political interest in that space. There's now a platform oil platform that was developed while I was making the film. Mm-hmm. There was like a huge infrastructure impulse in Ceiba Playa. So these things are happening in the background, and I'm not showing it specifically because that's not the Ceiba Playa Jorge Envision, I don't think. That's something that maybe in 5 years we'll see the outcome of these systems and power happening in Ceiba Playa. And I think he has a very planned out, like a very specific goal in his life. But this is not a story about like him going there. This is a story about like why and how, like why does he want to stay in Ceiba Playa? And I think that was my search, and I think that's what I'm expressing. If you see in the project in the website, then you get to see some glimpses of this development happening in Ceiba Playa, because that's just like a note that I have there, like a note. But the main core of the idea I was looking for is like just capturing this desire of Jorge of like really enjoying home, and then how any home, it's enjoyable. It's just have the way that you see it or experience it is, I don't know. I think that's the core ideas of the film, how you can experience a space and how you can make I mean, this happens to me everywhere I'm like everywhere I live, like how I love the places I live. And I think that's what very honestly, I was trying to capture through his eyes. And I think that's what the film tackles. He does have a very specific goal, but that's not where I wanted to go, because then people start making resolutions of Jorge, which I didn't want that at all. Like I didn't want to I didn't want people to believe they know Jorge. I think that feels selfish in me as a filmmaker, like just telling you this is Jorge and that's it. There's no more to it. So I didn't want to go there. Then I just firmly avoided it.
I like that, and I think the film avoids that very well. Of like, you don't want to put us in a position to judge him, like to judge his choices or his life. Or we're like living in the beats of his life more than like trying to decide if he fits like a certain model of a story.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, yeah, even writing about the film is kind of like a challenge, because then I'm like putting in words the thing I'm trying to avoid. Just, I don't know, something that came to mind.
So I did want to talk about something actually that is in our plans of the conversation, but it's flowed really well. But what is this idea of like, what is our responsibility, I guess, as migrant, Latino, Latinx filmmakers here? Like, what is our responsibility? Like, it sounds so official to me to talk about our responsibilities, but like, what is our role? Maybe I'll speak a little bit about that. Like this idea of I once had somebody tell me, you can't make a movie about a guilty person. I'm working on a project about someone who's in prison, and that's how I came to BAVC initially. But I had someone tell me that it didn't make sense. Who would want to see a story about someone in prison? And then second, who would I was setting a bad example for my community. Who would respect that? I was talking about the bad things, and I needed to tell uplifting stories. And that really drives me crazy, because I feel like I have an authentic connection to that story. And the same thing with 499. It's a genuine need to tell the story. And I think like as artists, like that's the first thing that we have a responsibility. If we have any responsibilities, it's probably that one,
I agree. I think there's so much responsibility to putting things out there for people to experience. I think not necessarily the art that you make for yourself. I think that has a lot of therapeutic and like ways of like healing yourself and really making art for yourself. But if you're trying to hit an audience and get to an audience, I think there's a lot of responsibility. I mean, later, some of the projects I'm doing are on live streaming as a form of art making. And that has a lot of responsibility, because you're asking people to be here. So for example, right now I feel responsible for the 19 participants that we have here, because I should not make just noise. There's so much things going on online that you should be careful how you make people spend their time. Time is really precious. But then at the same time, I think I do believe as artists that you're trying to put something out there that we are culture changers, right? Like that's my own answer. Like why I do the things I do is because I do feel my role in society is to hopefully portray or help to make a cultural change for more equitable landscape, like a better world, or like these ideal spectrums. And I do feel having other voices, like in your case, which I don't know anything about your project, but you're telling me there have someone who is guilty. But I think understanding the point of view of someone who is guilty it's great. Like we should hear these people. Like we should not just put them on the side and they don't have a voice. I think that will be the role of the film. Like I think everything can be uplifting if you, I don't know, you see it in a different way. I think I went everywhere.
No, but I agree with what you're saying. I think that's really great.
I want to ask you, how do you feel about the distribution of your film? I don't know if this is something that's not in the void part of our script. So I want to ask you about like, how do you envision your film being consumed? Or like, I want to know like, or your next project even. Maybe that's better.
I think for $4.99, for instance, like we're planning this really interesting thing, which there's a nonprofit in Mexico that will do screenings with a solar powered projector, like I guess it runs on batteries or something, and a pop-up screen, and they go to locations. So we're gonna be able to go to all these locations that are in the film, from the beach to the mountaintops, and screen the movie to people who, you know, saw us filming it, or people who are in the movie. Like I'm still in touch with most of the characters in the film, and like that is going to be amazing because, you know, like we're planning other things like screening it in the Mexican Senate, for instance, but like screening it like on site to real people in these communities that welcomed us, that's going to be so cool. And you know, like we are talking about it all the time. Like whenever I reach out, or one of the characters reaches out to me, they're like, "Hey, when are you coming? I'm bringing my friends." And like, they've all seen their section, their interview, you know, in the film. They've seen that because the film is now going to be released in Mexico at a film festival. So I wanted them to see that in case they read anything in the press, and they know. And but it's just been great to have this ongoing collaboration with them, and to also like one thing that I kept going back to people is like, man, like this is just a movie. It's different than anything that you've done, but the, you know, like with the press about your story of what happened to your family, but this is just a movie, you know, and you're gonna have to live with this, and I know you're gonna have to live with this when I leave. That's a big thing that I've learned. You know, it's like when you deal with people who are in trauma, like you have to acknowledge that you're not going to fix it by making your movie, you know. And so the distribution is going to be about that for me, about enjoying the film, seeing my people who are now my friends, and supporting them, and acknowledging at the same time that this film, you know, it's a documentary. It doesn't, you know, they're still fighting for justice. Every single person in that movie is still fighting their fight. Yeah.
I'm like the omniscient voice that's breaking in. This is like the behind the scenes. We were talking before everyone joined around hosting online events versus in person, and like the roles that don't exist in person that exist here on the screen. But if we can, oh, Rodrigo, you just went away.
I'm still here. I'm still here. It's just my camera. Paula knows about this.
Okay.
My camera's embarrassing me.
I'm just giving, yeah, I would love us to also start generating some questions for Miguel and Rodrigo, because the two of them were pretty passionate about getting some, you know, conversation with you all. And it's a nice intimate group tonight. So if there are questions, you know, you could even open yourself up to video and introduce yourself from the shadows. Or if you don't feel comfortable, you can drop a question in the chat that we can phrase for both of them. We have one question already from Paula that I don't know if you saw, Rodrigo, in the chat. What do you think the political and public reaction will be to $4.99?
I think it's a mixed reaction. I think you know, it's a very sensitive subject especially in the U.S., for instance. You know, it's very sensitive that the film follows this guy's footsteps, and I've run into that question of why. And I also feel like, you know, we don't know enough in the U.S. about the history of the world. And in Mexico, I feel like people who are on the ground doing this work, like the work of justice and activism and trying to build a rule of law, like they're, you know, I'm in conversation with many of them, and they're really interested in the film. And so, you know, to tie that into the other question by Don, where can we see the films? Like, we're working on that so that hopefully when COVID dies down, you know, $4.99 will be available, and will be, we can see it in theaters, hopefully, if they're still alive. You know, we can go to a theater and watch this movie and have these conversations. But, you know, I feel like if we think about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, like the Nuremberg commissions, all of those commissions were about telling the truth and listening, because punishment doesn't restore anything. You know, punishment just divides, and there's no one to punish about colonialism from the Spanish now. All we can do is change the future. So that's kind of the political conversation that I'm trying to have with the film. But, you know, we're kind of hunkering down and waiting for COVID to mellow out so we can really make that impact.
Thank you for that amazing answer. I think one of my questions we touched upon a little bit when we were during our rehearsal, but Miguel, you brought up this kind of notion of like how people consider doc as like in a traditional form where it's like, you know, there's a lot of assumptions, right? That we're kind of these detached, objective viewers or voyeurs watching like reality. And both of you kind of explode that and play with that. And you kind of touched a little bit on it, but I would love for you again to kind of talk a little bit more about interactivity and why is it important to allow viewers to belong or to create some sort of immersive quality or some invite viewers in a new way? And like, how does that change the narrative or change the way that we participate in storytelling?
I think documentary is like a very it's like a perfect space for create multiplicity in stories. Because we're capturing life or like representing life in some ways, and life is not one shade. Like it's not like just no one thing. It's like many things. It's complex, and because it's complex, and we have tools to create complexity and participatory storytelling and interactivity, I think it's perfect to really capture life in that way, like to add other senses to our decision making, to add, we're always selecting what to see, what to hear, and have more options in a spectrum to allow the viewer to have a spectrum of like how they're engaging with the media. I think it's something powerful. You really, once you commit to it, you can get way more than just a note. So you get like other perspectives, and then you really can embody the content that you're trying to express. I think that's the qualities of participatory, like to have more participation. And you can see it. I mean, we live in an age where there's so much participation with our media. I mean, the fact that we consume things that we can pause, that we can play, that we can watch half of it, and then tomorrow you keep watching blah. That's very participatory. Like we can break the media like so much. You can access it in your phone. You can access it anywhere. You can watch a film if you want to. Hiking, like put the screen, you can watch a whole, I don't know, a screen. There's so many ways that we're consuming media. Capitalism is using it hardcore right now. Why not artists using their same tools for other stories? We are trained to consume because social media, but there's like many ways that we can share. Like maybe there's a film that only happens on Instagram, right? Like on the Instagram stories, that's a whole documentary, like a 6 months performance of like you documenting a happening or life of someone, or like the story of like a story that should be told. And I don't know, I'm just coming out with ideas right now. But yeah, I think those tools are available, and I think there's such a world and like such an opportunity to be able to take advantage of them.
How would you answer that, Rodrigo? I'm curious. And I'm also curious, if no pressure, but if you can field that question in a way where I'm curious about the relationship between allowing for nuance and complexity and justice. Like what is that dynamic too, where like there's an opening for perspective, but then there's also, you're dealing with power. So how do you negotiate those?
I think there's this issue of the chain of injustice, right? Like if there's something unjust, you can't respond with injustice also. And I'll say that all the folks in the film that shared their stories, and we're talking about like people who are looking for their son who were disappeared, or their daughters who were brutalized and murdered, they all want this dialogue. They don't just want like punishment, they want that dialogue and that understanding, so that the rest of us, not just like the very, top perpetrator, but just the rest of society understands like what injustices have happened and how they can be transformed into a different future. And it's really funny because last week the Zapatistas, in Chiapas, so the Mexican president has been asking Spain and the Vatican to apologize for this conquest from 500 years ago, right? And then the Zapatistas released a letter and they said, listen, like, stop using the past for political gain. Like, stop playing games. We've got problems today, and we have nothing that Spain needs to apologize for. We love, and then they named all these like writers, from Cervantes to like, the present day, and like, Cervantes to Garcia Lorca, and all these painters and all these things, because they were able to hold both things together, right? Like the need for justice is now, right? Like the whole point of a restorative, sense to history is for today. It's not about, getting stuck in the past. It's about what doing something today can transform tomorrow. So that, I mean, I'm not saying it's easy. It's obviously really hard because very few countries are able to accomplish it.
That was wonderful. Thank you both. And we have another question from the audience. How do you envision the future of expanded cinema and its relationship to the future of consumption and viewership? It's in the chat too, if you need to visually read it.
Well, I think, yeah. I want to know what Rodrigo thinks, and then I'll respond to that.
I mean, I think like audiences.
Wait. I have a personal question that you can say you can respond or not, and then this answer of this question. Like, one, what would you think if someone's watching $4.99 on their phone? You could, I don't know. I just want to know that. Like, what's in your mind? How you're feeling about that? And then. Yeah, like what's your vision of the future of that?
I worry about the phone thing because my sense is that folks don't watch slower movies on the phone, and that it's the death of a slower kind of cinema. Not that I don't think $4.99 is super slow. I had this argument with someone the other day, and I was like, it's not slow, but I just worry about that. I also worry about like the things that it takes 88 minutes to build to, but at the same time, there's like this kid from Merced, for instance, who's like my ex-neighbor, and he sends me all his movies that he makes for the gram. And like, it's stop motion animation. He's like super empowered. He's intuitively understanding all these story elements, and creating different types of story structures, so I'm excited by it. I think I need like, some counsel on how to dive into that kind of filmmaking. But I feel maybe I represent, like this combination of like, it's seductive, but also scary that a lot of filmmakers feel. Yeah.
Right. In my guess is like, at some point, there's filmmakers, maybe it will be me, maybe it will be Rodrigo, who will make films that you have to go somewhere in order to watch them on your phone. Like geolocated films. You have to go there. That's the only place you can watch it. Once you're there, your phone tells you, yes, I'm here, and then you can access the film. Why will that be important? Because most likely you need your space to be surrounded by it, and the film just complements this aspect of it. That's expanded cinema right there. And that's something that's totally doable right now, totally programmable, totally that could happen. And what's the story? That I don't know. That's what we haven't done it. I don't know. That's what, that's how I envision it. I mean, and companies are doing this already. Like, unfortunately, money drives innovation, and that this is something that happens all the time. Like, ask you, are you here? Yes, and then you can access something. Yeah, I think that's what I envision. Like that, more filmmakers could be using other like technologies that are like new media or whatever. I mean, 5.1 sound, surround sound was new media of decades ago. Now it's like a norm everywhere. Like not like a norm, but it's like very well adapted to it. Then what options have you seen for expanded cinema for distribution? Seen for expand. In my case, I want to ask you this, Rodrigo, but in my case, I love the art spaces to show are like, I mean, that's the space to show expanded cinema, like installation. I mean, just recently went to the De Young and it has like a few expanded cinema pieces, I will say, that really expand on like the films and the documentaries, on the videos. Like it's just allocates for people, a flow of people engaging in there in a space. But I will say there's like filmmakers who have tackled the idea of expanded cinema in theatrical exhibition by choosing what sound are going to play before the film and after the film, what type of lighting they have in the movie theaters. I think that has been tackled, and I think other major distribution websites are already tackling like the ideas of like expanded cinema. There's a service that I won't say the name, but the Spiller wanted to make a film that was going to only be played during the night, for example. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good example actually of like commercialization of expanded, cinema formats. I don't, I feel like feature-length filmmakers that we're kind of stuck in the paradigm of money and capitalism, and our projects, require money. They're prey really to a distribution model that, like for those of you on this call who've ever tried to distribute a film, like the odds of really making your money back, like the work you put in and the, like that dinner your mom had to cook or, gladly had to cook, like that's not happening. And I think the industry, and I'm one of those people who just insists on like trying this model. And I think it really isn't meant to be all these things like sustainable, creative, all of that. And I think that expanded cinema, to me, and getting to know you and in this conversation particularly, it's been like, clear that that's kind of like where the cracks are appearing in more traditional cinema roles, or paths, like, like expanded cinema is gonna blow up in that sense because of this like lack of balance in like traditional big format movies. There's just no balance. So anything that empowers you to combine your life with art making is going to be very nourishing and fruitful, I think, in the future. But a lot of us have a lot to unlearn, I guess, in that process.
Yeah, I embrace expanded cinema because I'm from a place where we don't have multiplexes. We didn't have them while I was growing there. So while I was filmmaking was watching TV in your hammock. And that was very expanded because you're like swinging while watching a film, very dynamic, and you're, and then just the ways that access film or media was like always like cumbersome and like never like a straight line to go to the movies. You just go watch the film that you want to watch. So I guess like looking for waves of watching a film comes natural because you don't even have the access of like a normal distribution film. So like when you start making them, you start showing them with pieces of fabric and maybe borrowing a projector, and then suddenly you have expanded cinema because you're showing it in a non-conventional way, making sure where your people sit down and blah, blah, blah. So those aspects of like figuring out how to show your films, I think opens a very big possibility of like part of the film, like how you're going to show the film.
Paula just asked another question. I was going to say if there's any final questions to drop them in the chat. Rodrigo, do you see the question? I'm curious to hear what casting was like. How important was your actor's face?
I didn't get to meet my actor in person. Before he signed on the film, he and I met on Facebook. So like in a way, that really resonates with me. What you were saying, Miguel, about hacking. I don't think you said hack. I think you said break, but hacking, like the system and technologies. And it's like, well, now I could cast in Spain through Facebook, which is free, and I could see the student's videos for free, and he could send me a video for free, and he can get to know me pretty well, you know, before deciding to come out here. And you know, I really appreciated his face, but not only his face, but like the story that comes with him behind that face. You know, like he has suffered in life, and that suffering created a humility that allowed him to really connect with the real people. But I didn't, you know, this is all like, it sounds like I knew all this. It was all explored together. And I realized soon enough, I was like, man, this dude really has gone through a lot. He doesn't just look like he's gone through a lot, he has. But yeah, like, I mean, I think that I identify with this idea of hacking things for your own use. Okay, I don't have money to do a super production. We're still going to use this format. We're still going to shoot it in the lenses that are used for Gladiator and for all these big epics. And like, I don't have money for like recreations of battle, but I'm going to have this dude in this really authentic looking costume, and it's going to do the hack for me. You know, it's going to hack the epic genre. So.
Do you see the question in the chat in regard to?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to kick that one over to Miguel.
Well, I had a piece that it's not expanded cinema. I think it's more like an interactive video piece. It's a drum that has like that's a drum screen. It's a screen, but you have to touch it and you see animations happening of the space and the brain. And then I've been thinking about remaking it with better tools, better blah, blah, blah. But now there's no touch anymore, right? That's things of the past. Everything that we touch is no longer meant to be touched. Or right now, maybe, I don't know about later. And so I'm just trying to think about like, I mean, even theaters, all of them, like, they're like, you can rent a movie theater now. I read that you can rent a famous brand movie theater for $99 and you can get your own cinema for yourself. So I think it's just gonna lead people to do more. I mean, we're seeing it. Well, the drive-ins are coming back. Alternative exhibitions are coming back. I mean, maybe this is an opportunity for distribution to be rethought. And then maybe you start making your own film spaces to show your film. Maybe this will actually allow a real expanded cinema distribution industry to happen, where you make a film and maybe you just want to show it next to big pieces of water, for example. So you'll find a pool, or you show the film next to the ocean, or you show like, then you start making these experiences. And I don't think it's a crazy idea. I think this has happened many times. I mean, we're in Halloween times, and this happens all the time. Let's go to a place to watch horror films at X time. That's happening already. And I think the new generations are going to be longing for, because we have so much access to media, I think the new generation is going to long for these type of experiences that are more unique. And I think that's where expanded cinema in forms of distribution will make this happen. I mean, and even with COVID, you're way more selective of where you're going and how you're doing it. So maybe this is it. Like we should start right now. Let's make films for expanded cinema distribution.
I love that idea of like films that are like, screening in a space. This is where I want to show my film, and you must make a pilgrimage to watch it here with us as a community. And I think that's very liberating. And hopefully we are building on that with new work models and new, like shifting of the pressure, because frankly, I think money and the need to make a lot of money is a huge albatross hanging over the neck of the film industry, man. It's like, how many people get to make a, like The Mandalorian and write that, right? And I feel like with all these artists trying to climb this mountain, it's like an impossible task. And there's so many talents that don't make another film because they fail market wise, and this idea that you could just create another marketplace and ecosystem is really awesome.
Yeah, I do feel interdisciplinary ways of making are key. I mean, theater has been doing this for a long time, ways of alternative exhibition, although market-wise, I don't know if it's a great example to put in place. But maybe it's a combination of everything, right? Like the idea we're still in a little bit from theater and still a little bit from cinema and still from the industry, and just combining all that into a new form of distribution that is more liberating, because I do feel it's way more liberating knowing where your film is going to be shown and how. I mean, I bet, well, I don't know about you, but this has happened to me with many filmmakers that get to show their film sometimes at places. They are very nitpicky about the color of the colors that the projector is showing and the sound, how sound played. So I think, I don't know, I think that's also part of filmmaking. Where do you show the film? It's just like another filmmaking tool.
Do we have more time for more questions, or are we?
If there's, yeah, I mean, if there are more questions, I want to respect both of your time because you've been going for like a long time, and I feel like we're we could all do this all night. Maybe we can't. Maybe we're getting to that age where we actually can't do it all night. But yeah, if there's one last question, I think we can make space for that. But also wanted to thank everyone for putting the questions in the chat and being so engaged. Because it adds a lot of dimension to the conversation, and we can't see anyone, but it still feels intimate somehow. I also, as we're waiting for potentially a question, if both of you could just remind folks how to stay in touch or stay connected to your work, that would be really great.
Facebook is a beast that I'm, trapped by. So you could connect with me through Facebook or just Instagram as well, or some of you like I'm already in touch with. So I think I would love to continue this conversation and to continue this connection, this community building that we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, Instagram be a good way to keep track of myself, and also if you want to reach me. My last 3 collaborations happening over Instagram, so that seems to be working, and it's also my website there. Yeah, and I'm super accessible to just talk.
Well, thank you both so much. I think a lot of what we said was kind of in conversation with how we opened, which is expanded cinema in a lot of ways gives tangible paths forward to create. We talked a little bit about this, but how to build a new memory and how to enlist technologies that kind of Miguel said aren't necessarily new, right? It's technologies from a paper to the ocean to something like augmented reality. It's all technology, it's all media, but how we can use that to tell our stories in ways that both are accessible and interesting and invite participation. And I think, Rodrigo, to echo what you said, there's this kind of dialogic nature in both of your work that I think is so needed right now. And it's quite difficult in a time where we're kind of baited to want a certain kind of justice that looks like blood or looks like something else. And so I really appreciate the conversation and the invitation to listen And for those of you who came late, Rodrigo talked a lot about listening as the first act of reckoning. And so I think that's a great first step, and just sustained effort that we can all leave the conversation with is reflecting on how we can listen deeper to ourselves and the stories of others, so that we can use art as a connector, which is, I think, why we are gathered here tonight. And yeah, I'll put the, Daniel, if you want to put the chat, the website, and then Paula or Brittany, maybe you can chat our website so we can all stay super connected. We'll be hosting more town talks. We're experimenting again with like moderation and not moderation. So if you have any feedback for us, definitely, maybe Brittany, you can chat an email for people to send us feedback if you have anything that you'd like to see in the future. But we're so overjoyed that you chose to spend your precious time with us this evening. If we can give, a round of applause for Miguel and Rodrigo. That was extremely generous and stimulating on this lovely, I almost forgot what night it is, Tuesday evening. So thank you. And if Miguel and Rodrigo, I don't know if anyone on the call had final words, but thank you all so much.
I appreciate you guys putting this together. I love BAVC. I'm glad that I'm getting to know your work, Miguel, and CiNEOLA as well. Thank you so much. And I hope one day we can meet in person. That's my, the other side for me of all these conversations. Like, when can we meet in person?
That's a great.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Rodrigo. Thank you, BAVC.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.